My name is Charles Harker. My undergraduate work was in architecture at Texas Tech. My thesis project, as I was about to graduate, was a curvilinear structure. So then I left the Lubbock area, wanted to move to Austin to go to graduate school here, and at that point, wanted to continue with this research into freeform curvilinear architecture that was proposed in that, and met up with two fellows, Evan Hintner and Tom Lee, young architects here that were also interested in the same area. We started working on something that we later called the Earth House, and that was about a 1,800 square foot structure out on Bee Cave Road. And it was quite revolutionary in that we were using new materials, polyurethane foam as a primary building material. And we wanted to explore curvilinear form, again, for the psychological effect. The idea is that with the curves, you can create architecture that actually does evolve out of this old adage that architecture is frozen music, and that you can create harmonic forms that have a psychological effect not too unlike music. Dalton Bloom joined us. We had gone through some changes. Evan and Tom had dropped out of the project. I had reformed Dow Design Group with a new group that included Betty Gaddis, Tom Hatch, and others. And we were living in yurts at that time, out on the site, and Dalton Bloom, came on board and wanted to work with us because he said he wanted to design and build his own house. And he was wanting to learn about the processes and the technology associated with building with polyurethane foam. We worked together for a good while, and then he came to me and he said, Charles, he said, after experiencing this, I want you to design my house. Dalton said that he wanted something that could go in any art museum in the world and that could live past both of us. He wanted to be built, as he put it, I want to do something right. I want it to be built well. Dalton Bloom had worked with me on the Earth House, and he understood a lot of the theories and ideas that went into it. There was a lot of Eastern philosophy in that, and in terms of studying the philosophy and the culture, I introduced a certain amount of dissonance into the forms that in the end we decided not to use here. We talked a lot about the fact that he wanted people to be able to come down the path and immediately have a positive affinity with the building because it's so unusual. So I put some thought into how to achieve that, and I decided that the best way to do it would be to try to base the formal shapes and the thing as a whole on something that almost everyone coming down the path would have experienced at a kind of a subliminal level. And I decided that the European fairy tale was something that most people coming down the path would have had in their background. And that an analysis of those European fairy tales was that many of them started with a walk in the woods. You would wind around and get lost, and then you would come upon a fantastic structure of some sort, a gingerbread house or the sentient castle in Beauty and the Beast. And I'd seen that. I love that movie, Beauty and the Beast, the original black and white with a castle that's kind of aware. You're watching the wall, face in the wall, kind of wake up and look around and go back to sleep again. And I, of course, couldn't do that in this, but I wanted to have that kind of feeling that it was somehow almost alive. And I wanted it also to integrate naturally into nature and feel like it was growing out of the ground as opposed to being something that was planted there. And so I designed it so that you start up at the top of a hill on a site that we found that was totally secluded and isolated. And there was a dense thicket that you had to wind your way through down a long, winding path. And then at a certain point, the forest opens up, and you see this fairy tale structure nestled in the woods. And we both wanted it to be something that when you saw it, you got to a certain place. The path was designed so that it would actually stop you. You would actually take a slight turn up at that point. You would slow you, stop you. You would see the structure revealed for the first time, and you would smile. So the building forms are intended to evoke a feeling, and then once you're inside, it continues to amaze you with this complexity of forms. But finally, as you go through the house, I wanted it to somehow leave you with this feeling of a synergetic relationship between mankind, architecture, and nature. There's a place in the back part of the house where everything is designed to optimum conversational distances, where people can stop and sit and talk. And at that point, you begin to notice things like how the water from the roof comes down and drops onto a tree. And so you have this tree sheltering you or shading you as you're sitting outside, and the house is watering the tree, and the tree is shading you. And I found that without even having to talk to people about it, they would notice it and begin talking about those principles. This man-nature relationship is underlying all of this work. The drawings for this were actually done almost after the fact. The whole design was done on site, and it was done with a model that I had done in my yurt out of sculptor's wax. And it showed, the most of the structure almost as you see it. But one day I came home, you know how hot it gets down here in the summer, and the model had melted. And so Dalton said, can you show me some drawings that give me a better idea of what's going on, especially on the inside? So I did a whole series of drawings of the floor plans, a roof plan, and an interior perspective from the living room looking back up toward the circular staircase. And it was all done on mylar with ink and stippled. The site is totally isolated. It's out in Westlake Hills. Unless you know exactly where it is, it's almost impossible to find it. And that's all intentional. It's about 2.5 acres. It's down in a steep ravine. When you're down in that ravine, you're completely isolated. It's completely built up around it. There are houses all around it, but you can't see them. We wound up working on the project over a period of 11 years, from 1973, when I started the design work, to 84, when it was finally completed. None of us knew at the time that that was the case, that it was going to take that long. And it wasn't that it really took that long. It was primarily the fact that he had to build it owner-built, out of pocket. And with that, every now and then he would get a little money and we would build, and then he would run out of money and we would stop. So we worked back and forth like that, he and I side by side for years, off and on like this, with me making the commitment that I would make sure that I stayed with him until it was done, because no one else would be able to come in and take it over. First thing that we did was to come in with a jackhammer, and we jackhammered the trenches in for the foundation into the limestone shelf itself. And then we poured a foundation with a slab and reinforcing bar in the trenches that we jackhammered in, and started up off of the slab with a lamella grid of number 4 reinforcing bars that created a web for these curvilinear shapes, and then they were welded so that all the joints have a welded connection. It's very sturdy, very sturdy. Next, because we wanted to use the polyurethane that we'd experimented with earlier in the earth house, And we wanted to use that for two reasons. One, it's a perfect sculpting material. And two, it has incredible insulation value. In the end, with the thicknesses of the urethane foam in combination with another material used on the inside that is also a good insulation material, I figure that the R values of the Bloomhouse range somewhere between 60 and 80, R60, R80. So once the urethane foam was begun, and that was sprayed in place with a Gusmer spray system, we would drape polyethylene over the armature, the steel armature, spray against it from the inside, peel it away, move it, and we would just work our way across in a patchwork until the form was there. Then we'd go to the outside and spray from the other side. And then once the place was done, I would come back in and begin sculpting with actually a little tree pruning saw by hand. One of the great joys for me was having the opportunity to send everyone away for 6 months. And I came out to the Bloomhouse every day for 6 months and sculpted. It was a wonderful time. And so the next step was to begin going over the house with a metal lath that was all, again, hand laid in place and stapled into place, and then we plastered it. So I brought in two people that I knew quite well, Alan Barber, who I'd gone to school with at Texas Tech, and a friend of his, Didi Spontak, and the two of them, with myself present through the whole process, plastered this house. Everything that is plaster, they did inside and out, and it's a remarkable job. We used a sprayed recycled newspaper that is also fire resistant, but made a perfectly acoustical surface on the inside to cut down on reverberation. When you have hard surface floors, hard surface walls, you have to have some place to relieve the sound transfer, something that absorbs all that sound. And it worked very well, I think. I wanted that first vision of the structure to be one, as I said before, that was very positive and kind of imaginative in terms of what it might evoke in you. So I designed it so that it had a kind of a face, and it was not defined so much as a face as something that could be interpreted as the face of a grinning whale or a friendly Tyrannosaurus Rex, or almost any one of a number of creatures that you could imagine when you walked up. And at the same time, I wanted it to be something where you didn't really know exactly what it was you were looking at. I wanted it to be abstract to a level where it was open to much interpretation. Many kinds of images or ideas could be evoked. Charles, he said, "What's that out front?" I said, "Oh, that's a little bridge because of the way the land slopes and all of that." And he said, "What's that on either side?" I said, "Oh, those are light fixtures. Those are, I call them the sentinels." And he looks at it and he says, "Charles, you're not going to put 7 of those out in front of my house, are you?" And I went, "Oh yeah, Dalton, it's got to be 7. All right." And we had a number of other discussions like that. One of the things that I was wanting to do was to use the things on the site to the greatest extent possible. So for a while, we had cut down a number of these cedar trees that are so prolific out here to clear for the site foundation work. And my idea originally was to take those, to saw them into slabs, and then to use those on the floor so that there would be kind of these organic shapes on the floor. But we decided that that might create a number of problems in terms of wear over long periods of time, etc. And so in the end, I began looking at other resources, and I saw an image of a grass stem that was sliced. And when you look at this grass stem, it has a whole series of tiny circular capillaries of different sizes nested together that carry the water up through. And I decided that that would be an interesting way to deal with the floor. So we found a company that made concrete floor tiles that could be cast, and we created a series of molds that were at different sizes, like the capillaries in the grass, and those were the final solution for the floors. Also, that same idea was used with circular tiles on the kitchen cabinets. All the counter surfaces were done in a similar way. The woodwork needs to be there. It's a something that you can put your hand on, and the texture and the smoothness and the silkiness of the surface is what you feel in the right place. And the stucco, of course, has a kind of a sandy granular texture, and it's okay to touch that, but like on a handrail, you want something that is inviting. Thinking about how to integrate the wood into the structure, we brought in some woodworkers and discussed how to get the effect that I was looking for, with the effect being I wanted the wood to look like it was breaking the surface tension of the plaster and sort of peeking through. In other words, it's like, is everything underneath this plaster all wood? You know, what is I wanted as before, like with the initial reaction to the structure outside, I wanted you to wonder about how this, what is that? What does that mean in terms of what's underneath? We came up with a way to put, like in the handrails, blocks of cherry wood onto the surface of the foam itself, and there was a kind of a rough plaster coat already there. We molly bolted these shapes that were fitted into place, and then the woodworkers with grinders would come through and grind them down, with me using crayons to help show how I wanted the flow to go, and then we plastered back up to them with the final coats. The cabinetry in the house is a special kind of set of considerations. The cabinetry required that we bring in woodworkers from outside, again, actually the same folks that did the handrails, and they blocked up carcasses for the kitchen area and for other areas, the bathroom, the stereo center, and all of that. And then we started working on the doors for that, which were all to be exposed cherry, and they would block these pieces out, glue, laminate cherry together, and then they would bring them out here. We would set them in place, make sure they fit, and then I would start sketching on them with crayons, with red and blue crayons, with red being high and blue being low. So they would leave, just barely take off a little for the wherever it was red, and then they would go deeper with the blue. And we would work on this back and forth several times until we had the right shapes aesthetically and also functionally, because it would also create like the handle for you to pull out a drawer or whatever was there. This was an exacting process. It went back and forth for quite some time. And as we went through the place, Dalton and I would work together, and sometimes he would say, well, don't you think we need a little something here? And so we would wind up with a little cherry shelf, like the one under the stair here. We also had a lot of cabinetry tucked back behind a turn in the wall in the bedroom area for storage. Again, all built in and tucked back behind to control that tendency for clutter. So the place would remain more artistic, more artful, and more sculptural. One of my friends, Jakob Schurer, who is a choreographer and faculty member at the time out at the university, wanted to come out and see the place. And I said, well, let's wait until it's at a point where you can really kind of enjoy it, which wasn't that far off. And so I invited him out. And the first thing he did when he walked in, without saying a word to me, was he just started dancing up and down all of the stairs. And I'm standing there looking at him going, what in the world is he doing? Finally, he came back over to me and he said, I've seen a number of sculptural places before and the stairs never work. He says, but I want to compliment you. These work just fine. One of the later things that developed was the fireplace. How do you introduce a fireplace that has a certain kind of form to generate the stack effect that causes the smoke to go up the chimney instead of filling the room with smoke? And so we decided to use a fireplace unit that was ceramic, but we didn't want it to look like it was a manufactured item for reasons of maintaining this sculptural integrity. And so we set it into place, and it sat there for quite a while with me looking at it and trying to figure out how to integrate it in a way that made it feel like it was perfectly functional, which it had to be, of course, to burn the place down, or more importantly to me in terms of aesthetics, how it just sort of fit in and looked like it was completely integrated into the place. At the same time, I wanted to express what was going on inside the fireplace on the outside. In other words, if you look at what goes on, the fire smoke is all spiraling up the chimney, and it's a very dynamic set of conditions inside there. So I thought, I think I'll try to reflect what's going on inside that chimney on the outside with the sculptured plaster work. Wasn't as easy as you might think. I tried several times to get something that felt appropriate before I finally settled on the final outcome. And it was, I think, a very nice integration of that idea or concept of the internalized forces in the final expression. And at one point, I was talking to a friend of mine. We're standing out and looking at it, and there's a fireplace in the house, and the fireplace has a chimney on the outside. And he's built a couple of houses himself, and he looks at the chimney, and he says, "What is that, Charles?" And I said, "When was the last time you had to ask someone what a chimney was?" And he laughed, and he said, "I love this place because it makes you rethink your whole relationship with what a piece of architecture is, what a house is, what a chimney is supposed to look like." One of the more challenging design features, both in terms of structure and in terms of form, is the tower. The tower is the feature that from the outside provides you with that first introductory glimpse of something that you wonder, what is it? But from the inside, it's a spiral that leads up to a tiny tower room that was originally designed as a place for Dalton Bloom's young son. So it's really pretty small, but it's also a place where you can go up and sit, feel a little isolated, read, and kind of feel tucked in to this separate little world from what on the lower level is ostensibly one open space that bleeds one space into another. At one point, we were working on an expansion outside of the house on the back area, and so there's a back terrace or patio area. The bedroom area and the bathroom area both open out onto it. We wanted to take advantage of the privacy by putting an outdoor shower just outside so that you could step out in the nude without worry and shower off or cool off. And then further out, we talked about a kind of a hot tub or cool tub. It didn't necessarily have to be a hot tub, but it was going to be about the size of a hot tub so that 3 or 4 people could climb in and more cool off than warm up. But we discussed back and forth, hot tub, cool tub. What should we do? In the end, we loved that spot, and we would go out there and sit and have lunch sometimes, which is why we kept thinking about it. And so we started by putting in a bench there, which was going to evolve into the hot tub. But unfortunately, the rest of the tub never got built. And so there's still a great little sitting area out there, one of my favorites, where you could go out there, sit with a bottle of wine and just look out into the ravine and feel, again, even more isolated, because this was a place that Dalton originally started thinking about as a kind of place of meditation. He wanted a place to get away from everything. And so the house was stage 1, and the back patio area was stage 2, and then that one little spot, which is really tiny and totally isolated, was sort of stage 3 of that process. The Bloomhouse, for both Dalton Bloom and myself, was truly a labor of love. Together, we spent 11 years from start to finish before it was completed. And in that process, a lot of things took place that are still dear memories to me. In the years that have followed Dalton's involvement, it's passed through several hands. And recently, Dave and Susan took this wonderful piece of architecture on and have been committed to doing a wonderful job of restoring it. The work is, at this point, 40 years old, and it's interesting that it's still published. It still seems significant to people that are involved in architectural journals. I think the reason is simple. It's something that never came into style and therefore never could go out of style.